The projector hummed in the silence of the MIT auditorium, a low, steady drone that felt like a countdown. I stood behind the podium, gripping the edges so hard my knuckles turned white. My dissertation on neuroregenerative pathways was projected on the screen behind me. 5 years of sleepless nights, failed experiments, and relentless grit condensed into 60 minutes that would define my career. But I wasn't looking at the distinguished committee members waiting for me to begin. I was looking at the front row. 2 chairs sat empty. I had placed reserved signs on them myself that morning, smoothing out the paper with trembling hands. My mother had promised, "We'll be there, Elena. We wouldn't miss your doctorate defense for the world." My father had nodded, checking his watch, distracted but present. At 8:59 a.m., 1 minute before I was set to start, my phone buzzed against the wood of the podium. I should not have looked. I knew I should not have, but hope is a dangerous, stubborn habit. I glanced down at the screen. A text from Mom. "Tiffany is having a crisis. The lighting at her venue is all wrong for the launch photos. She's hysterical, Elle. We have to stay and help her manage the staff. You're smart. You'll be fine. We'll celebrate later." XO. The air left my lungs. Tiffany, my younger sister, the influencer, the golden child whose crisis was bad lighting while I was about to defend a medical breakthrough. The committee chair cleared his throat. "Miss Vance, we are ready." I looked at the text one last time. "You're smart. You'll be fine." It wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal. It was the story of my entire life. I looked up. The room blurred for a second, then snapped into razor-sharp focus. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel the urge to cry. Instead, a cold, clinical calm washed over me. It felt like a switch flipping in the dark. I reached out and turned my phone off. "I am ready," I said, my voice steady as steel. I didn't know it then, but as I began to speak, I wasn't just defending my thesis. I was prosecuting my parents, and the verdict was going to be silence. To understand why 2 empty chairs felt like a death sentence, you have to understand the House of Vance. We grew up in Connecticut, in a house with white pillars and a driveway that curved just enough to hide the entrance from the road. My mother, Catherine, curated our lives like she was running a museum exhibit. Everything had to be pristine. The hedges were trimmed to the millimeter. The Christmas cards were color-coordinated in July, and her daughters were products on a shelf. Tiffany was the display model. I was the inventory manager. From the time she could walk, Tiffany was being prepped for a life of being looked at. Pageants, modeling classes, vocal coaches for a singing career she didn't want. She was beautiful, ethereal, really, with hair that seemed to catch the sun even on cloudy days. Mom treated her like a porcelain doll that might shatter if she actually did anything. "Tiffany, don't lift that, you'll chip a nail," Mom would say. Then she'd turn to me. "Elena, carry your sister's bags. You're strong. You can handle it. You're strong." It sounded like a compliment. It was actually a life sentence of servitude. I remember my 16th birthday. Or rather, I remember Tiffany's 16th birthday, which happened 2 years later. For mine, I got a sturdy, refurbished laptop. "For your studies," Dad said, patting my shoulder. "We know you're going to do great things. No party. Just a sensible dinner at a place where they had coupons." For Tiffany's 16th, the driveway was transformed into a nightclub. They hired a DJ from New York. There was a chocolate fountain the size of a small car. And in the driveway, a brand new convertible with a red bow sat waiting. I stood on the porch, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres because the caterer was short-staffed, and Mom had hissed at me to make yourself useful. I watched Tiffany scream and jump up and down, clutching the keys. Mom was beaming, tears in her eyes, filming the whole thing for Facebook. Dad was puffed up with pride, the benevolent king gifting his princess her chariot. But then, I saw something. It was just for a second. The flash on Mom's camera went off, blindingly bright. Tiffany's smile faltered. Her shoulders slumped, just a fraction of an inch. She looked at the car, not with joy, but with exhaustion. She looked like someone who had just been handed another heavy prop she had to carry. Then Mom shouted, "Look at the camera, Tiff! Smile big!" And snap, the mask was back. The radiant, grateful daughter returned. I blinked, and the moment was gone. I told myself I imagined it. I told myself I was just jealous. Jealous of the light, jealous of the love that seemed to be poured into her like water into a crystal vase, while I was the cactus in the corner, expected to survive on nothing. That dynamic became our architecture. I fixed the Wi-Fi. I proofread Dad's emails. I calculated the tip at dinner because Elena is the math whiz. I was the invisible engine that kept the Vance family running smooth and silent. Tiffany was the HUD ornament. They paid for Tiffany's college, a liberal arts degree she rarely attended because she was building her brand. I got scholarships. I worked in labs until my eyes burned. When I told them I got into the PhD program at MIT, Gad asked if it would cost them anything. When I said no, he said, "Good girl." That was it. Good girl, low maintenance, high yield. I stood on that stage at MIT, the applause from the audience washing over me, and I realized the text message wasn't an anomaly. It wasn't a mistake. It was the summary of 26 years. They weren't here because they didn't think I needed them to be. I was the strong one. I was the one who didn't need applause. I was the utility bill. You only notice it when you stop paying it. But standing there, gripping my diploma, I decided something. If I was a utility, I was about to cut the power. The ceremony was a blur of velvet robes, stifling heat, and the kind of aggressive joy that only graduation days can produce. I sat in the sea of doctoral candidates, clutching the heavy cardstock that bore my new name, Dr. Elena Vance. Around me, families were practically climbing over railings to get better angles. Fathers were weeping, mothers were screaming names. It was a cacophony of love, loud and unapologetic. I kept my eyes forward. If I turned my head to the left, I would see the empty block of seats I had reserved. If I turned to the right, I would see my phone, which I had finally turned back on. I should not have checked Instagram. It was a form of self-harm at this point. But there it was, a new post from my mother, uploaded 20 minutes ago. The location tag was Le Jardin, an overpriced French bistro in downtown Boston, just across the river. The photo showed Tiffany holding a glass of champagne, looking theatrically exhausted, her head resting on Mom's shoulder. Dad was in the background, putting into a steak. The caption read, "After a chaotic morning saving the launch, we finally get to relax. So proud of our Tiffany for handling the pressure like a pro. Boss babe, family first. No mention of me. No, sorry we missed it. No, thinking of Elena. They were eating steak 10 miles away while I became a doctor. They had erased it. Dr. Vance?" I snapped my head up. Dr. Sterling, my thesis advisor, and the closest thing I'd had to a parent for the last 4 years, was standing beside me. He was a man of few words, known for tearing apart weak arguments with a single raised eyebrow. "You didn't look at the audience when you walked," he said quietly. "I didn't want to trip. I lied." He looked at the empty seats in the VIP section, then back at me. He knew. He had to know. "Elena," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "the work you did, it stands on its own. You don't need a cheering section to validate the fact that you just changed your field." He paused, then squeezed my shoulder. "I am incredibly proud of you." That broke me. Not the neglect, but the kindness. I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded once, and walked out of the auditorium. I didn't go to the reception. I didn't go to the mixer. I went straight to my apartment. I had already packed most of my things. I had a job lined up in San Diego starting next month, but I decided right then that I wasn't waiting for the lease to end. I threw the rest of my clothes into garbage bags. I left the furniture. I left the toaster Tiffany had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. It was a re-gift. I found the original card addressed to her inside the box. My phone started ringing around 7 p.m. It was Dad. "Hey, kiddo, we're just finishing up dessert. We were thinking of swinging by your place to say hi before we drive back. Did the thing finish yet?" The thing. I looked at the screen. I looked at the boxes in my trunk. I looked at the keys to my apartment, which I was about to drop in the landlord's drop box. I didn't answer. I blocked the number, then Mom's, then Tiffany's. I got in my car, turned onto I-90 West, and drove. I watched the Boston skyline fade in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was nothing but a flicker of light in the dark. I was alone. I had no safety net. But for the first time in my life, the silence in the car didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. 2 years. That's how long it takes to detox from a lifetime of being a secondary character in your own family. San Diego was everything Connecticut wasn't. It was bright, open, and honest. I landed a position as a lead researcher at a biotech startup that was developing non-opioid pain management solutions. I wasn't just fixing the Wi-Fi anymore. I was fixing the human nervous system. And the silence? It was lucrative. Without the constant drain of solving my family's problems, my career skyrocketed. I was promoted twice in 18 months. I bought a condo in La Jolla with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. I drove a car that I paid for in cash. I was free, or so I thought. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. My assistant, Leo, knocked on my glass door. He looked confused. "Dr. Vance, there's a woman on the main line. She says she's your mother. She says it's an emergency regarding the Vance estate." My stomach didn't drop. It tightened. The old Elena would have panicked. The new Dr. Vance just sighed and saved her spreadsheet. "Put her through, Leo, but record the call." I picked up the receiver. "This is Dr. Vance. Elena. Oh, thank God. We've been trying to find you for months. Did you change your number? We were so worried." The voice was my mother's, but the tone was wrong. It wasn't the dismissive, sharp tone I knew. It was breathless, sugary, and desperate. It sounded like the voice she used for wealthy neighbors she wanted to impress. "I blocked you, Mother," I said calmly. "I'm at work. You have 2 minutes." "Blocked us? Oh, honey, don't be silly. Listen, we saw the article in Biotech Weekly, the one about your patent. Elena, we are so proud. We've been showing it to everyone at the club." I spun my chair around to look at the ocean. "You have 1 minute," she faltered. The sugar coating cracked, revealing the rot underneath. "Fine. Okay. Look, we need to talk. Things have been difficult here." "Difficult how?" "It's Tiffany," she sighed, the name dripping with sudden venom. She's back home, living in the basement." I raised an eyebrow. The basement? I thought she was living in a penthouse in Manhattan. That was before the scandal, Mom hissed. She invested everything in that skincare line. "We, your father and I, we backed her. We put up the house as collateral, Elena. We thought it was a sure thing. She promised us triple returns. And the FDA shut it down. Undeclared allergens. She's being sued. We're being sued. The bank is calling every day. The club membership is suspended." Her voice rose to a shriek. "We are drowning, Elena, and your sister just sits downstairs staring at the wall while we lose everything." I leaned back, a cold smile touching my lips. So, the golden child had tarnished, and the moment she stopped shining, the moment she stopped bringing them prestige, they turned on her. "That sounds unfortunate," I said, "but I fail to see how this concerns me." "Unfortunate? It's a disaster. We're going to lose the house. The neighbors are talking, Elena. The neighbors. That was always the worst fate for Catherine Vance. Not bankruptcy, not her daughter's failure, but the neighbors knowing about it. We need family," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We need the strong one. Dad wants to fly out to see you. We need to discuss a restructuring for the sake of the family legacy." I looked at the clock. "I'm very busy, Mother." "Elena, please, just dinner. Dad is already looking at flights. We just want to see you. We miss you." I knew it was a lie. They didn't miss me. They missed the ATM I could have been. But then I thought of Tiffany. Tiffany, who was apparently rotting in a basement while our parents scrambled to save their reputation. If I was going to cut them off for good, I needed to do it in person. I needed to see the wreckage myself. "Fine," I said. "This Saturday. My city, my restaurant. And bring Tiffany." "Tiffany? Why?" She's a mess. Bring her, I ordered, or don't come at all. The restaurant I chose, Azure, was designed to intimidate. Perched on a cliffside, it was all glass, steel, and hushed conversations that cost more than a Honda Civic. I arrived 15 minutes early. I ordered a bottle of sparkling water and sat with my back to the ocean, watching the entrance. When they walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. My mother, Catherine, was still wearing Chanel, but it was a season old, and her signature blowout looked a little frantic, like she'd done it herself in a hotel bathroom. My father, Richard, looked smaller. The bluster was there, the puff of the chest, but his suit hung a little loose around the shoulders. And then there was Tiffany. The girl who used to command rooms with a hair flip was gone. In her place was a ghost. She wore an oversized beige sweater that swallowed her frame and no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she stared at the floor as she walked, trailing behind our parents like a prisoner of war. Elena, Mom squealed, rushing over to hug me. The scent of her perfume was overpowering, a desperate attempt to mask the smell of anxiety. Oh, look at you. You look prosperous. Dad gave me a stiff nod. Good to see you, kid. Nice place. A bit flashy, but nice. Tiffany didn't say a word. She slid into the chair furthest from me, pulled out her phone, and started scrolling. Hello, Tiffany, I said, testing the waters. She glanced up, eyes dull and flat. Hey. Then she looked back down. Don't mind her, Mom snapped, snapping her napkin onto her lap. She's been in a mood since the subpoena. No resilience. Unlike you, Elena. The waitress poured wine. Dad drank half his glass in one gulp. He didn't wait for the appetizers to arrive before he started the pitch. So, Elena, he began, leaning forward, we're impressed. The research, the patent. We always knew you had the brains. But brains are useless without family backing, right? I swirled my water. Is that what we're calling it? Backing? We need to talk numbers, Dad said, his voice lowering. The legal fees for your sister's mess are bleeding us dry. And the market, well, the market hasn't been kind to my portfolio. We need a bridge, Mom interjected, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Her fingers were cold, just to get us through the quarter, to save the house. You know how much that house means to the family history. How much? I asked. I wanted the number. I wanted to hear the price tag of their love. Dad cleared his throat. $450,000. That clears the lien on the house and covers the settlement for Tiffany's lawsuit. I raised an eyebrow. $450,000. And what is the repayment plan? Mom laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. Repayment? Elena, honey, it's family. We're not a bank. Think of it as retroactive tuition. We supported you for years. You paid $0 for my tuition, I reminded her. We gave you a roof. Dad slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. We fed you. We raised you to be this successful. And now, when we are in a tight spot because of her, he jabbed a finger toward Tiffany, the eyes of the world are weighing the mark, and all of the world's. That's why I'm really considering. You love me facing love. You love me facing. You're going to act on that, and 10 years later. I know me never filled it. But in the 19th century, Mom added, if we lose the house, where will she go? She has no skills, Aline. Do you want her on the street? I looked at Tiffany. For a split second, her thumb stopped moving on her screen. I saw a tiny muscle twitch in her jaw. She's right here, I said coldly. Stop talking about her like she's a piece of furniture. She might as well be. Dad grunted. Useless. We bet on the wrong horse, Catherine. I told you. That was the moment. The cruelty was so casual, so practiced. They were stripping Tiffany for parts to guilt me into saving their own skins. I took a slow sip of water. I had heard enough. Order whatever you want, I said, opening the menu, because this is the last meal I'm ever buying you. The silence that followed my declaration was heavy enough to crack the glass table. Mom blinked, her smile twitching like a glitching video file. I'm sorry, Elena. I think the wine has gone to my head. Did you just say the last meal? I said, I'm not giving you the money, I repeated, my voice steady, cutting through the ambient jazz of the restaurant. Not 400,000, not 400, not 4. Dad's face turned a shade of purple that matched the Cabernet he'd been guzzling. He dropped his fork. It clattered against the china, a sharp, violent sound that made the couple at the next table look over. Excuse me, he growled. You sit there, in your designer suit, drinking sparkling water that costs more than a gallon of gas, and you tell your own father no? Yes, I said. I'm telling you no, just like you told me no when I needed a ride to the SATs. Just like you told me no when I asked you to come to my graduation because Tiffany had a lighting crisis. That again, Mom threw her hands up, exasperated. You are holding on to grudges from years ago. This is real life, Elena. This is our home. Your legacy. It's not my legacy, I corrected her. It's your stage, and the show is over. You ungrateful little... Dad leaned over the table, his voice rising to a shout. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head. We tolerated your dullness for years while we focused on making your sister a star. And now that we need a return on our investment, you think you can just walk away. Return on investment, I repeated, tasting the bile in the words. That's all we ever were to you, isn't it? Tiffany was the high-risk, high-reward stock. I was the savings bond. Boring, reliable, ignored until you needed cash. Don't you dare psychoanalyze us, Mom hissed, grabbing my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin. We did the best we could. You were difficult. You were so quiet. Tiffany needed us more. I pulled my arm back, disgusted. Tiffany didn't need you. She needed parents. Instead, she got managers. She was still staring at her phone, but her thumb was hovering over the screen. She wasn't scrolling anymore. She was waiting. I'm leaving, I said, grabbing my purse. I pay the bill for tonight. Consider it my final settlement. Don't call me again. If you walk out that door, Dad roared, standing up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. The entire restaurant went silent. Waiters froze. If you walk out that door, you are dead to us. You hear me? I will write you out of the will. You will be nothing to this family. Richard, sit down, Mom hissed, looking around frantically at the staring diners. The neighbors might be here. Let them look, Dad shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. Let them see what a selfish, cold-hearted daughter looks like. You think you're better than us. You're nothing. You're just a wallet with a PhD. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel shame. I felt light. You can't write me out of a will that has nothing in it but debt, Dad, I said quietly. And you can't disown me, because I already divorced you 2 years ago. I turned to walk away. And you, Dad spun on Tiffany, meeting a new target for his rage. Put that damn phone away. Your sister is abandoning us, and you're checking Instagram. You useless waste of space. This is your fault. If you hadn't failed, we wouldn't be begging her. Tiffany didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. For the first time all night, she looked up. And when she looked at me, she wasn't the broken, dull-eyed ghost they thought she was. She winked. Tiffany didn't just stand up. She unfolded. The slump in her shoulders vanished. Her chin lifted. The dull, vacant look in her eyes was replaced by a sharpness that could cut glass. Actually, Dad, she said, her voice dropping the vocal fry she'd used for a decade. It was clear, commanding, and sounded exactly like mine. I wasn't checking Instagram. I was checking the wire transfer. It just cleared. Dad blinked, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. What? What transfer? Tiffany reached into her oversized tote bag. the one they thought was full of makeup, and pulled out a thick blue folder. She tossed it onto the table. It landed between the appetizer plates with a heavy thud. "I suggest you look at page 3, she said coolly. Mom reached for it with trembling hands. She opened the folder, scanned the document, and then let out a sound that was half gasp, half choke. This says the lien on the house has been purchased by Vance Ventures, LLC. She looked up, hope flooding her face. Elena, you did it! You created an LLC to save us. Oh, thank God. I knew you wouldn't abandon your family. I laughed. It was a genuine, dark laugh. Read the signatory, Mother. Mom looked back down. Her eyes widened. Member manager, Tiffany Vance. Dad snatched the paper. What is this? Is this a joke? You don't have any money. You're bankrupt. That's what I let you believe, Tiffany said, crossing her arms. Because if you knew I had money, you would have spent it on country club dues and facelifts. She walked around the table, standing next to me. We stood shoulder to shoulder, a united front for the first time in our lives. You see, Tiffany continued, addressing our stunned parents, every time you gave me $5,000 for a designer dress, I bought a knockoff from China for $50 and wired the rest to Elena. And every time you paid for her vocal lessons, I added, picking up the narrative. She was actually taking online courses in portfolio management, which I tutored her in. We've been partners for 6 years, Tiffany said, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. While you were too busy polishing your golden child and ignoring your scapegoat, you didn't notice that your daughters were talking. You didn't notice that we hate the way you live. I took the money you wasted on my image and I invested it, Tiffany said, aggressively, under Alina's guidance. And now, I own the debt on the house. I own the mortgage. Dad looked pale. He looked like he was having a cardiac event. So, the house is safe? You bought it? Thank God, Tiffany. You're a good girl. We can. I didn't buy it to save you, Tiffany interrupted, her voice ice cold. I bought it to evict you. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. Even the chef had poked his head out. Excuse me? Mom whispered. You have 30 days, Tiffany said, checking her watch. The eviction notice is being served tomorrow morning. I'm selling the property, I'm taking the profit, and I'm moving to San Diego. I hear the biotech scene is booming. She looked at me. Ready to go, Dr. Vance? Ready, Miss Vance, I replied. We turned our backs on them. Behind us, I heard Mom start to sob, ugly, loud, theatrical sobs. I heard Dad sputtering, trying to find a word big enough to hold his rage, but we didn't stop. We walked out of the glass doors into the cool night air. As we reached my car, Tiffany let out a long breath and pulled the hair tie out of her bun, shaking her hair loose. God, my back hurts from slouching. Was I convincing? You deserve an Oscar, I said, unlocking the doors. Or at least a Golden Globe. She grinned, climbing into the passenger seat. I don't need a trophy. I just bought a house. I drove us away from the cliffside, away from the parents who saw us as investments, away from the people who thought love was a transaction. They had spent a lifetime trying to pit the beauty against the brain. They never realized that if you put them together, you become unstoppable. I looked over at my sister. She wasn't the golden child anymore, and I wasn't the invisible daughter. We were just family. The real kind, the kind you choose.